Barbers of Reddit, what was your oh shit moment? While I was training at a pretty chic salon in London, there was a kid who came in for a cut with his mum. She was a regular, the typical bi-weekly blow-dry client that was always dressed in the finest fineries and sent her kid to private school. He sat down in my colleague's chair and the mum gave a fairly detailed and particular instruction of a short back and sides as if my colleague had never heard of a haircut before. She then sat down in the waiting area and picked up a magazine and began reading. This kid was a little shit. He squirmed and complained the entire time. My colleague, bless her, was very diplomatic and tried to be firm, but fair to this kid, she was very experienced at this point and dealt with a fair share of spoiled kids. Towards the end of the cut, she very clearly told the boy to stay still as she was cutting the stray hairs around his ears. She told him that her scissors had just been sharpened and would hurt a lot if she cut him. He agreed to keep his head still. However, as previously stated, this boy was a little shit. He suddenly turned his head to something, and she caught the top of his ear. Now, she wasn't lying about getting her scissors sharpened, and those things are hella sharp when they are. I will never forget the top bit of his ear just resting on the blades of her scissors, and her wide-eyed pale expression of realization of what had happened. I don't know if you've ever cut an ear, but those things bleed. At this point, the mother put down her magazine, put her thunder face on, and stormed over to my colleague's section with a screaming and bleeding child in it. Wordless, she raised her arm with an open hand and slapped the kid straight in the face. That'll teach you for not listening. The whole salon was in complete shock. She pulled him up by the arm and dragged him out of the salon without a word to anyone else. We never saw them again. Absolutely, the most mental experience of working in a salon. That, and the crazy color change I had to do, but that is a story for another time. I've got a few stories. Started combing a guy's hair to get ready to cut it. Shifted the comb over the left side of his head and the hair did not move the way it was supposed to. I pulled the comb down again and realized that you did not have a left ear. Didn't say anything about it. Gave him a cut that still worked with it, and he left happy. Had a blind man come in once who said that this haircut was his first stop after getting out of a 25-year prison sentence for murdering his wife. Gave his name and everything. We looked him up, and he did indeed murder his wife who was also blind. During barber school I was the most eager to learn to straight razor shave of all the customers, so the instructor gave me all the hardest shaves, including an 80-year-old dude whose skin was so loose and unhealthy that each time I pulled the blade over his flesh, it brought up just as much dead skin as it did hair. I wasn't cutting him or anything, he just had that much dead skin just chilling on his face every other week. Had a mom bring in her son, about 8 years old, with beautiful long hair. Told me to shave it all off as short as we could go, which is a big red flag. Being still in school, I missed the warning signs and buzzed up the back of his head in time to see a bug, as long as my thumbnail scurry back into where the hair was long. I inspected more closely and found several bugs of similar size. My instructor chewed out the mother very harshly. I suppose these aren't really oh shit moments in the way that you might have meant it, but I've got a lot of stories. Pretty sure I was a hairdresser's oh shit moment, but it wasn't her fault. I wear my hair in a short pixie and had gone to a random hair shop in the mall to get it shortened up. We were chatting. She was cutting. Things were good. And then I see her freeze in the mirror as she cutting above my ear. She starts making a soft UHH noise and I see the panic in her eyes. I turn my head and see a bald spot above my ear about 3/4 next 1/2 inch. As she starts babbling, but I didn't. I reach up and touch the spot which is baby smooth. I realized immediately that she didn't mess up, and I tell her don't worry, it wasn't you. This happens to me sometimes. My hair just falls out in spots, supposedly some form of stress-induced alopecia. I apologize to her because I always warn hairdressers if I'm aware I have a spot because of exactly this scenario, but I didn't know about this spot prior to the cut. She calmed down, but was super cautious for the rest of the cut. I had it happen again a few years later, but the minute I saw the back quote what the fuck look on the hairdresser's face I immediately asked if they found a bald spot before panic set in. I was in school still at the time and was cutting this guy's hair. He brought his girlfriend along. and she was watching like a hawk over me. I'm halfway through the cut and almost done with the fade when the person next to me has their trolley too close to me. So I go to move it, but I didn't pay attention that my other hand had the clipper still running with no guard on. I made a nasty line through the fade that didn't look intentional at all and was sweating my ass off on how I was gonna fix this. The girlfriend of course points it out, and the client is actually super chill about it and has me basically just run a super high 0.5 on the sides and back. 3 years later, and to this day I haven't had an incident that bad. I'm not a barber, but my favorite shit moment with a barber is when I learned that barbers, unlike cosmetologists or beauticians, can do more than cut hair. Barbers can suture injuries. I still have the scar on my ear where the barber had to sew me up after cutting my hair. 6 stitches. Never went back. Not me, but my mom, who is a hairdresser. Did you know that some hair dye chemicals don't play well together? Turns out the lady had used some sort of home hair dye chemical that basically has tiny bits of metal in it. She didn't mention. My mom goes to dye her hair and puts the professional dye on it, and the hair more or less starts melting as the dye reacts. Her hair was totally ruined. There was no saving it. Only thing to do was to just get the new dye off as fast as possible. She was pretty understanding about the whole situation though. My coworker at a salon was cutting a girl's hair and found lice. The girl's mom had left her for the trim, and she had to wait for her mom in the lobby. We spent the next hour or so frantically cleaning around all of the other clients and stylists to sanitize the whole place top to bottom. When the mom came back and asked her why she didn't have her hair cut, she replied they found out. Who brings their lice-ridden child to the salon? Obligatory. I'm not a barber, but I've been cutting my own hair for years. Once I was doing a simple buzz cut and the guard fell off. I had a little airplane landing strip on the back of my head and had school the next day. I was allowed to wear a hat until it grew back. The barber my dad took us kids to growing up kept a plastic ear in a big glass jar of water. Told all the little kids, jokingly, that it was the ear of a little boy who wouldn't be still when getting a haircut, and he accidentally cut this kid's ear off. Said he was keeping it in formaldehyde to remind us all to be very still. It largely had the desired effect on the younger kids. Barber here. I'm pretty experienced and a successful barber with my own place, but I definitely made some mistakes along the way. This story still makes me die inside a little. When I was training, maybe a few months in, so I had a bit of confidence, enough for me to not realize I still didn't know what I was doing. I was cutting this guy's hair, and I got to his fringe. He wanted it really short, and I was standing in front of him cutting along his forehead whilst chatting away. I took my scissors away to comb his hair but flicked them around my fingers, and they swung round and hit the guy right in the fucking iris. I froze. He froze. Eventually I asked, "Did I just hit you in the eye by the way?" He said, "I think so," trying to act like it wasn't sore for some reason. It eventually blew up in the shop once his shock wore off and someone else got him out the door. Found out a month later his wife was a nurse and she used some kind of eye drop and his eye was only scratched. Thank God, because I thought I blinded him. I gave him a free haircut next time. Just the one though. It took me forever to get comfortable cutting around someone's ears. One time in beauty school, I was about to cut around a guy's ear and his ear literally ripped and started bleeding. When I went to bend it back, all he said was, "Oh sorry, I have some skin condition." I was so horrified that it would happen again that it took me several years before I was comfortable cutting men's hair again. Now 90% of my clients are men. Brother of a barber who used to be a hair model. Back when I used to have a good head of hair, his instructor told a story during one of the shows about a mobster falling asleep during a shave. While shaving him, he accidentally cut off a mole. He said he kept on putting towels on him and then snuck across the street and hid in a bar watching through the window until the mobster left. Since he was only renting the chair in the shop, he grabbed all his stuff and found another place to work after he was sure the mobster was gone. Oh geez. I've been barbering for 7 years and I've got a couple stories. Mostly communication errors. I had a client come in with a super tight haircut, looked like it had just been cut, and asked for a 0 on the sides. I'm not sure what this guy was on, but a 0 is bald to me. So I start my bold line for my fade, and he freaks out that it's way too short, and I ruined his haircut. Since this never happens to me, I got super upset and felt absolutely terrible. I've had clients who text me and ask for an appointment, and then I forget to book it. Then they show up, and I'm busy, and they don't have an appointment. I always calm them, because I feel terrible. I used to work in a low-income neighborhood, and worked at a black barber shop. I was cutting a kid's hair, and since it was so curly you couldn't see his scalp or anything, started cutting into it and sure enough, he had ringworm. I have hella stories, but those are just the ones that come to mind. I had an oh shit moment happen to me. I was the client, lady didn't give a shit. Basically was getting a haircut at a salon and this Filipino lady was doing the haircut, and she was really chatty. No worries. The issue was that she was also too worried about chatting that she cut her fucking finger with her scissors and continued to bleed on my hair the rest of the fucking haircut. Fuck that lady. Had to go home and literally put hand sanitizer on my hair like gel. I didn't know if she had AIDS or something. Never went back. My mom was cutting my hair when I was younger, around 2nd grade. She was only using the razor at one point, without the thing that makes it a certain length. Towards the end, a piece of hair fell on my nose and made me sneeze. My head moved, and I ended up with a bald spot. I ended up having to get shaved completely bald to fix it, and she refused to give haircuts after that except for one time during COVID. Not a barber, but my cousin worked in a salon when I was a kid and I would hang out there a lot after school. One day she cut a guy's head pretty bad with the clippers. Lots of blood, but it wasn't too serious. This led to them dating and eventually getting married. One time, my comb caught the ball of an eyebrow barbell and pulled the bottom ball up, or top ball down, I can't remember, into the pierced hole. She managed to push the bowl back out into the proper place, and I insisted her haircut, which I was almost done by that point, and she let me finish, which was nice, was free. I never saw her again. Fair enough, and I still feel so bad for it, to this day. It really hurt her, she yelped pretty loud. My dad let me line myself up once. Fucked up. Decided to cut the whole thing off and go bald. The plus side to being black is that 99% of the time being bald looks fine. I guess I was part of the 1% that looks like a fucking Whopper malt ball. The typical not a barber here, but I used to go to a local barber college to get my hair cut because it was cheap. One girl had never cut a white guy's hair and her teacher asked if I was okay with it. I said sure, she has to learn somehow and it's just hair, it can be shaved and should grow back. Told her how I wanted the haircut, pretty simple, a little short and off the ears. Jokingly said do not take my ears off. Long story short, I left with a bald head and a band-aid on the top of my left ear after bleeding like a stuck pig due to blood thinners, where she nicked me with the scissors. Even her teacher couldn't save the haircut. I did my best to try and help the girl calm down as she was ugly crying. Went back a month later and asked if the girl was there. Thankfully she was, and I simply smiled and said town too. She did it perfect second time around. Once was getting my hair cut when stylist cut my ear, barely, but since ears typically bleed profusely when barely cut, mine did too. It would not stop, and she had powder to help, but even that wouldn't stop it. This went on for about 10 minutes. I eventually left holding some towels to my ear which stopped bleeding after another 10 minutes. She was super nice, and felt bad for her. Haircut was overall nice too. Suffice to say I never went back. Just the embarrassment was enough to not go again. My entire life. My last name is Barber. I'm not a licensed barber or professional by any means, but I have been cutting my own hair for about 10 years. I'm really good at it, save a lot of time and money, know exactly how to do it, and never have to worry about getting something I don't like anymore. but it has taken a lot of trial and error over the years, especially when I was learning how to fade. This was 3 years ago. I start cutting like I normally do and start fading my sides. At the top on my head the guard pops off. Huge fucking chunk falls down my face. So me, still learning, not knowing how to fix it, decides it's best to just buzz it, which I've really only had to do 3 times in my career. I look dumb as shit with a buzzed head, so for some unknown reason, I also decide to shave my beard, thinking maybe it'll equal it all out. Nope. Apologies if this offends anyone, but I look like I'm receiving chemo at this point. Bro, I look like a thumb. Big toe looking ass. So I hated myself. My wife still makes fun of me to this day. I got endless shit from my family and was attached to a hat for like 2 months. This was the moment that made me never fuck up again. I'm not a barber, but this is super related. I was that little kid that couldn't sit still in the chair at the barber shop. One time I went with my grandma. Whole other story. This lady is crazy and dumb AF. Basically she got all impatient that the barber was taking forever to cut my hair. Not even his fault, since I was the one that couldn't sit still. Rather than complain like a normal Karen, my own grandmother grabbed the scissors out of this dude's hand yelling "Jim that" in Spanish and went in for a cut. The dude didn't even have time to react. The very first cut my grandma made was to my ear. Needless to say her expression changed real fucking quick and the old bitch still lives with us. When I was a little kid and hid under the table with a pair of scissors to cut my own bangs, my mom screamed when she saw my work. I remember doing it by feel, didn't even have a mirror, but I don't remember how it looked. Ironically, a few years later my mom tried to trim my bangs and she did a horrible job. I had to wear a hat for a while. I'm not a barber, but one time my mum cut my ear with the hair clippers and she freaked out whilst I was sat there wondering what the hell was going on until she shouted, "Get a tissue, we have blood loss XD." Not a barber, but when I was waiting for my turn to get cut, one of the barbers stopped cutting another guy and ran to the toilet. Guess it was literally an oh shit moment. I got seated with another barber thankfully. Barber here. I had a client who came in that I hadn't seen in about 2 years. He was an older gentleman that used to come in once every couple months, but he just stopped after his wife passed away. Anyways, I guess his family put him in a home after she died, and they did haircuts or something in there. I don't know. I didn't have enough time to figure it out. But his caretakers brought him in for some reason, dropped him off, and said they'd be back in a couple hours. Personally, I thought it was a dickish thing to do, but I always liked Gary, and it was cool to see him again. He smelled terrible, though, and all the color in his eyes was gone. His skin seemed really, I don't know, crispy. You could almost hear his skin crackle and pop when he moved his disgusting arms and legs. Gary wasn't even chatty like he used to be, but I figured he was depressed since his wife died, his kids abandoned him, and he smelled like bags of trash from a Chinese restaurant. Whatever. But the whole time he was waiting he was wearing a baseball cap. Pirates or something. I dunno. I don't follow teams. Dude sits down and he mumbles some shit about his haircut. And I'm all like, Gary, it's going to be alright, no big deal. Let's get this hat off and I'll give you a trim on the house. Let's get you good. When I took Gary's cap off there was a lot of resistance, I guess. The cap didn't come off easily is what I'm trying to say. I had to actually use both my hands to get that sucker off. So I lift the cap off with both my hands, and I'm gripping the bill so tightly I hear a small pop. Dude had the cap on tight, right? Even weirder, some bits of Gary's hair came up with the hat. It's starting to fall out now, big guy? I asked. Gary mumbled a response. I put his hat down on the counter and went to work. Or would have, because that's when I noticed that Gary had a huge rash on his head where his hair should have been. And even worse, the rash was moving. It was fucking wiggling, even. I was scared as shit and leaned in. Oh no. I went back to his hat and saw that some of Gary's hair in the hat was moving as well. A little bit of vomit came up from my stomach, and I told him we would have to do the haircut another day. The caretakers told me that they didn't know how long Gary had maggots in his head, but he only lived for a couple more months. When I suddenly have a heart attack before finishing my client's cut. I went to a barber shop where the barber spoke very little English and somehow there was some sort of communication error between us, and he ended up shaving my sideburns up to the top of my hair. Ugh. My aunt was a barber in the 70s. One day during her shift a man came in and asked for a trim. During the cut he just offed himself. My aunt got a bit of brain in her mouth. Not the barber in this story. My younger sister was. This story happened about 38 years ago, so I'm recalling as best as I can remember. Among our friends group was a very sweet young man who we called Bubba. A little heavy and not the sharpest tool in the shed, but a sweet, good-hearted guy. Bubba's hair hung in his face, which drove Sissy nuts. We should note that he had a huge crush on Sissy. One evening we were sitting around my parents' dining room table playing spades. That's a card game. As always, Bubba's hair was hanging over his eyes. Sissy was practically twitching watching him, brushing it away every 30 seconds. Finally, he spoke up and said, "Bubba, you need a haircut. Let me just trim your bangs." Of course he immediately agreed. Scissors and a towel were quickly tracked down, and Sissy started clipping. It was uneven and kinda patchy. "This isn't going well." One of Genius' friends spoke up and said, "It ain't even. But I got an idea. Don't trim anymore for a minute." Dude pulls my mom's biscuit mixing bowl out of the cupboard and plonks it on poor Bubba's head. "There, just cut straight across." And she did. Then cut straight across the back. The oh shit moment happened when Sissy took the bowl off Bubba's head and we realized she had given poor Bubba a literal bowl cut. He looked like the Dutch boy Payne Kid's pothead cousin. One time I was doing clipper over comb to blend a client's haircut and I sneezed unexpectedly. I made a hole on the side of his head. I turned him around and tried to blend it in the best I could, but the damage was done. My mother is a barber. She was tasked with cutting my husband's hair for our wedding. The guard comb thing that goes on electric razor popped off while she was enthusiastically talking to me. She accidentally buzzed a zero on the back of his head. A zero is the shortest you can cut the hair without it being bald, I believe. We never told him, and no pictures were taken of the back of his head. If I can help it, I'll be taking this to my grave. If not, he'll forgive me, but I'll feel bad still. Been a professional barber for 2 years now. I like to tell my clients this story all the time, but it is the first time writing it, so bear with me. When I was in barber school I had a mother and her son come in to get a haircut for her son. They did not speak English very well, so there was a bit of a language barrier. She told me she wanted a 2 on top, which is very short, 1/4 inch left to be exact, and the little boy had close to 3 inches on top. So I figured they did not understand the lengths. I did try to explain to her that the 2 would be very short by showing her the guard, but she insisted he got a 2 on top. Being the dumbass I was, I started my clipper down the middle of the kid's head. I remember hearing the clipper take off a bunch of hair and the child knew something was wrong and starting screaming. "Oh shit." The mother came over and scolded me for taking it too short. She told me that she meant she wanted 2 inches left, not a number 2 guard. I apologized like 5 times and told them that I would at least make the buzz cut look good and get them a free haircut next time. As I was finishing up the kid's hair, literally on the last pass with my clippers, by an act of God or something the guard I was using popped off, and I went straight to skin down the middle of the top of this poor child's head. Oh shit, I put my hand over the bald patch on this kid's head and just pretended that nothing had happened. Thankfully one of my instructors came by and I was able to flag him down for some assistance. I took my hand off the kid's head and my instructor started chucking and told me to go in the back and get some water while he sorts this out. He ended up getting in a big fight with the mother because she thought I did it on purpose for yelling at me earlier, but it was and accidentally, and she did come to a school and pay $5 for a student haircut. TL. Doctor took a child's hair way too short. Tried to make it look good. Went even shorter than I already had on accident. Hiding back while instructor argues with mother about whether or not I did it on purpose. When I was a kid, the hairdresser nicked my brother's ear and it bled a bit. I'm pretty sure that was a no shit moment for her. My brother didn't even care. When I was like 5 I decided to steal the kitchen scissors, give myself a haircut, and then hide the hair in a toy purse. Once I realized what I looked like, I went up to my mom and told her I needed to go get another haircut. You can imagine her reaction. Kid, 17, with a bunch of acne, like total pizza face, and neck wanted a straight razor shave on the back of his neck and neck, sliced off a bunch of pimples that bleed for like 10 minutes, really gross. Not a hairdresser. I've had cartilage piercings pulled out by a hairdresser's comb before. It happened at 2 different haircuts, so now I warn hairdressers and take out the earrings. It doesn't hurt, but people kinda panic a little if it happens. Not me, but my mom. She's been doing hair for 40 plus years, and last Friday she had a new customer who was so unhappy with how her hair turned out. She called out of work that day while still in the chair. My mom gave up her Saturday off to fix it, but the lady is coming back in 2 weeks, so we'll see if that happens again. In the meantime, my mom's stressing that this lady truly hated her hair that much, and it's first time anything like this has ever happened to her. Not a barber, but within the first 2 weeks of COVID lockdowns, my boredom mixed with that impulse brought me to think shaving my whole head was a good idea. I also convinced my brother to do it with me, cause why not? For him, okay. For me, big mistake. Firstly, I do not have the best hairline, which I underestimated, because once the top was gone that shit was pulling graft functions on my forehead. Fucking Y equals you fucked up headers. I should also mention I'm very skinny, so mix the shaved head with that, and I looked like I was on chemo. In conclusion, good learning experience, but never again. Not a barber, but I was getting my hair done once when all hell broke loose. This girl with extremely long hair passed her, but came in for a haircut. Barber asked her how long she wanted her hair. There was miscommunication. The barber heard that she wanted it cut to the middle of her back. She later said she just wanted it trimmed. Someone misheard, or she lied for a free cut. Either way, a few minutes later she started crying because he cut off a good foot of hair on one side. She ran out of salon crying, was outside on the phone in panic mode. They had her come back after an hour, and the master stylist finished the cut. Either way, I feel bad for her. My mom accidentally shaved the end of someone's eyebrow, so she had to shave the other side to make it even. Lol. Covered cutting my husband hair, and had an back quote oh shit moment. Just told him to wear a hat in public for a while. I used to cut my flatmate's hair in my uni halls. My mate and myself taught ourselves from YouTube videos and a lot of trial and error. One day I was cutting one of the guy's hair, let's call him Jake, but I didn't have my clippers. Jake, not his real name, had a set of beard trimmers which had a pseudo guard you could use. I figured it was better than nothing. Proceeded to give him a 3 back and sides and a club cut on top. Jake wanted his 3 blended down into a 1 at the bottom. Yep, no problem, all done. Until I noticed that due to the style of the guard on his beard trimmers, every time Jake put his head back while I was cutting, it had left a line in his hair. I ended up having to give him a 0 undercut all the way round, which looked quite sick in fairness, but Jake never came to me for a haircut again, haha. Little late to the party. Not a barber, but a submarine sailor. Inevitably someone on the boat has to take the role of barber. Very early on I figured out that if I cut hair I could gain favor with people around me. First few hundred cuts went surprisingly smooth, and I gained a reputation for being good enough to get a cut for the wife. I had a waiting list, worked after hours, even spent money on some professional gear. It's a week before we get home from our long underway. Guys are lining up to get dolled up for their reunions. This older guy sits down, asks for a simple cut, buzz the top to a 5 and skin fade the sides. I start on my first pass on the top. Clippers cut through his greasy hair with easy boat rolls. I compensate. I'm almost done with the top and going for my final pass right down the middle. As I reach the front and shift to pull the clippers back, 2 things happen simultaneously. The man sneezes and the guard flies off. The microsecond between causes a perfect bald patch an inch behind his hairline. I handed him a 10 as an IOU for the fix up he'll have to get in a few weeks. Had a dude once after a perfectly normal cut ask me to shave his front hairline to look like he was receding. I was very confused after that. Also, I had a dude moan and grunt while I shampooed him. I was like, alright, guess I'm doing a good job then. So, basically I really wanted to meet this local judge who was like a real high flyer in the community. I managed to invite him to my barber shop for a free haircut, and one day, out of nowhere, he just turned up for a trim. I was like, oh shit, internally obviously, and murdered him, and had my neighbor bake him into a pie. I'm a little late to the party. Student barber. One of my very first cuts, which I should add I had never cut hair before I went to school, was an older gentleman. This gentleman had bushy wild eyebrow hair, so my instructor asked me to clean it up for him. Trimmer over comb was how she instructed it. I was nervous and shaky and my hand slipped and I came, literally, within centimeters of his eyelid with the trimmer blade. I gasped, pulled it back, half expecting to see a bloody blinded eye. He was totally fine. Thought I cut all of his eyebrow off. So I finished the service without cutting him and went on with my day. I'm not a barber, but twice in my life, I've had someone cutting my hair legit gasp and put their hand to their mouths. Then try to cover the shock and strike a kind of pensive how's that looking face. I don't blame the first guy, even though I had warned him. I told my neighbor my beard trimmer was deceptively small when he showed up to trim me up and informed me his ex-roommate had stolen his clippers. With the first line down the middle, he knew. After a couple more, he told me he thought we should stop, but I told him it was too late. He has given me the munk. The second was at an actual barber shop. They were younger dudes who prided themselves on being classic before it was cool. They had a keg, and they'd offer you a drink, no matter the time of day. Not sure how I didn't see this red flag back then. I'd had my hair cut there a few times, and I enjoyed it. That is until I had my first afternoon cut, one move in, and the barber immediately gasped, and well, you know the rest. He managed to prevent the Buddha cute but only barely. Oh my god. I'm so sorry. I know this post is more than long enough already, but I just remembered one more. And this guy was the biggest fucking asshole of them all. Me. It was my 25th birthday, and without going into detail, this is long enough already, but withholding all exaggeration, it was the worst ducking birthday of my life. Somewhere between being way too drunk and incredibly sad, I decided to cut my own hair. Back then I was crazy poor, and did this a few times prior to the night in question. Never so drunk though. I had a job interview that I couldn't afford to do poorly, and the next day though, at first everything was going fine. But then, when I went to touch a little bit of hair on the side of my head, I slipped and I took a whole razor-sized chunk out. Fun fact, was using same clippers as in story 1. But despite the poor decisions, the buzz in my hair, the hangover, and reeking of booze, I got the job. I was a hairstylist for 17 years. In the mid-90s, two brothers walk in. One about 17 or so, the other about 10. 17 years old leaves. My friend gets the 10 years old. Asks him what he wants. A mohawk, he says. Mohawk? Are you sure? Yes, says the kid. And he gets a mohawk. 17 years old brother comes back and is visibly confused seeing his brother with a mohawk. Why did you get a mohawk? He asks. Little brother says, I asked for a mohawk and got this. The older brother says, you were supposed to ask for a bowl cut. So the younger one forgot to say the right name and got a completely different haircut. OFC, this was when bowl cuts were popular. Hairdresser of 12 years. I once was combing a young girl's hair that had just got her cartilage pierced a few days prior. Sure enough, I snag it with the comb and rip the barbell straight through her ear. I went physically weak at the knees and cried a bit. It bled a ton. But she was, and is, the kindest client I've ever had. She refused to not pay me and never told any of her family, whom are my clients as well, what happened. Still cringe at this moment to this day. Not a professional, but I have two stories that somewhat relate to each other. When I was in high school, my mom would try to save some money by cutting my hair herself. When she was about to finish, she saw a part she needed to fix and grabbed the clippers, forgetting she already took off the guard, and gave me a bald spot at my hairline at the top of my forehead. Shit was traumatic. Fast forward 9 years to about 5 months ago. COVID is in full swing. People can't really get haircuts from barbers. A friend of mine needed a haircut, and she was willing to trust me. Basically all she wanted was the sides to be cut at a 3. I told her my incident with my mom cutting my hair, and that I would never let that happen to her. Then I noticed the guard on the counter, and I started crying. My mom used to be a hairdresser back before she had kids, and her coworker told her about a client she had once that had really matted and unkept dreadlocks. When she started getting through and chopping the guy's hair as he requested, she found a redback spider, black widow, just sitting in a part of his hair. My mom is a mostly retired hairdresser, but there are a handful of customers she still keeps because they have been coming to her for nearly 50 years. These ladies are getting pretty old and often have health problems. One lady had her colostomy bag busy open in the middle of getting her hair styled, so literally oh shit. I was the client in this situation. My hairstylist was doing a usual cut on me, and when she was cutting around one of my ears, her scissors caught onto the top inch or so of the cartilage, like the actual top part of the ear. She kept cutting harder and harder trying to get this thick hair not cut. It took me saying ow for her to realize she was cutting my ear. No blood, no cut, just a really bendy ear. She was distracted talking to my mom, since I was in like middle school at the time. She never stops saying it every time I get my hair done. Hasn't happened since either. My mom has a doodle that requires regular trims. One day she tells me the groomer is incompetent. Mom goes on to say that she took it into her own hands to repair the hideous chop job her baby was sporting. She starts to laugh. She can barely talk, she is laughing so hard as she says, back quote, I think I owe the groomer an apology. She presents her fluff baby, and it is sporting a dozen bald patches, a lopsided mustache, and a rat tail. I know one barber had an oh shit moment when he cut my brother's ear. Head stuff can bleed a fair bit. One time when I was a kid, my mum walked into a barber's with me and asked the barber to give me a muffet, long sides and fringe, shaved back, bald cap with a long tuft in the middle. Barber's jaw dropped and she just sort of stood there trying to process WTF had just happened. I was at barber school and a mother came in dragging her son by the hair demanding for someone to give him a baldy. When no one was willing because he was crying, she got mad and threw nearby barber equipment on the floor and proceeded to whip him with a belt in front of like 30 barber students, 3 instructors, and the 2 co-owners. Some of the barber students who got their shit thrown on the ground then tried to fight the lady. I think everyone there who wasn't trying to fight the lady had an oh shit moment. Mayo. She got thrown out by one of the instructors, but she came back about 2 hours later with a chair and a brand new pair of Walmart clippers. She knocked on the windows and started shaving his head outside the store. I worked at a prestigious salon in an affluent neighborhood of Atlanta. While I was shampooing a client's hair, a roach fell from the open rafter ceiling right into the shampoo bowl. I had to finish washing her hair without freaking out as to not cause a scene. I was not graceful about it by any means, but I managed to keep the client from finding out about it. When we were done, I tried to contain the demon roach by covering it with a towel and ran to the back to get the salon assistant / maintenance man to take care of the problem. Good times. When my brother got his first haircut in a barber shop, he of course was a bit nervous as he never had his hair cut before. My mom assured him that it would be okay and that it wasn't painful. The barber accidentally cut off my brother's earlobe, so that was a real oh shit moment for all parties, I think.